So I prepared just a small paragraph to start the discussion. Alhamdulillah, we have new members today.
Good.
So we've been discussing the civilization issue and the rise and fall. We discussed the book of Dr. Bashir Ahmed. I hope he will join us, but I don't know if he is busy or not today. Anyway, so I was discussing or thinking about the transformation that happened in early ages of Islam. Like we know that after Khulafa Rashidin, we changed to dynasty or dictatorship or tribal dictatorship. Now, some people, when they discuss the tribal dictatorship, they said, okay, it's something happened in the history. تلك أمة قد خلت لها ما كسبت. So it has nothing to do with our life. Well, I'm trying to say that transformation to tribal dictatorship has a very vital impact on the Islam as our understanding to Islam and to our actually history. What happened of the decline that everybody cannot deny, the decline of the Islamic civilization was maybe instigated by that, by the transformation from tribal dictatorship, from shura, and from everybody is equal, from Muslims are like the comb teeth, it's everybody is equal to the other, regardless of your color, of your religion. I mean, not even of religion in Al-Madinah, everybody was equal. I mean, Muslims, non-Muslims, the state will look at everybody the same. And between Muslims, regardless of your language, color, nationality, origin, whatever it is, doesn't matter. Even if you are Muslim from Rome, like Suhaib al-Rumi or Bilal al-Habashi or Salman al-Farisi or anybody come who new to the society in Mecca or Al-Madinah, he will have the same rights and same level. The difference is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it inna akramakum indallahi atqakum, taqwa. Taqwa is the thing that makes difference between people in the eye of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, and if the society is healthy, then taqwa will be the measure. So I would, my point is the transformation is very harmful and it caused the elite to change from intellectual elite, or I would say righteous people, elite, with critical thinking. They don't accept anything until it's really have an evidence or it's correct or it has to be criticized or scrutinized, I would say, into transformed into another kind of elite, which is the marriage between money or capitalists and militia or askar, as we see in today's regime in the Muslim land. So what we see today is actually something happened at that time when the tribal transformation, tribal dictatorship happened. So without looking at that and understand that and thinking of that as something wrong, then things will stay at the same. The elite will be the same, corrupted elite. To have a righteous elite, people with intellectual, the intellectual people leading the community or the society, then without that, our situations will stay the same. That's my point. And it's actually written in the chat if anybody wants to look at it. I will leave it for you, Dr. Salim.
It's Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalam ala Rasulullah. It's very unfortunate that when it comes to the history, we do everything about history that we're not supposed to do, and we don't do the only thing that we are supposed to do is to learn lessons, is to confront history as is, without any sugarcoating, without I mean, wholesale approach, which is that everything was lousy or everything was bad. These simplistic approaches will lead nowhere. لقد كان في قصصهم عبرة. The only thing that we should do with history is to learn lessons. And in order to learn lessons, you have to confront the reality as is. You have to have the courage and the bravery to do it. And to say there are some issues here, and to call things by name. There was a lot of bloody power struggle in the history of Muslims. That's not history of Islam. It's a history of Muslims, so that people will not be afraid to criticize it because it's not sacred. These are a human being. By the way, including the Sahaba, they are a human being. It's a history of Muslims, a human being. It has some very bright spots. Makes you proud, but it has also lot of things that makes you embarrassed. The point is not to say, to blame or to say that, or to adopt this wholesale approach. The point is to study what happened and what are the lessons that we learn so that we don't repeat mistakes. Because I think it's enough repeating mistakes. I mean, it's this statement they say in Arabic, التاريخ يعيد نفسه, that history repeats itself. It's not true. It's only in the Muslim world that history repeats itself, because mistakes are repeated. It's not history. History does not repeat itself. Other nations, they learn from their mistakes and their problems and etc., and they improve. So history does not repeat itself there. History repeats itself in nations that keep repeating mistakes because they don't do assessment, they don't do accountability, they don't do evaluation, they don't do documentation. And even if you go a step back, there is no even planning, because all of this requires planning and then documentation and then evaluation and accountability, etc. But so when it comes to our history, and I keep mentioning always, there is, if you want to summarize in one sentence the history of Muslims, you will find it very much linked to their level of understanding and commitment to their mission. The more when Muslims understand who they are and what is expected from them, what is the mission that Allah has assigned to them, and they fulfill it to the best of their ability, they thrive. When they abandon that mission or misunderstand it, a lot of time people end up doing the wrong thing, and they think they're fulfilling the mission of Islam, causing more harm than good. When there is a problem in the understanding or in the commitment, then start the decline. That's, if you want to summarize in a nutshell, that's the history of Muslims, has always been linked to their level of understanding of their deen and their mission and their commitment to it and their efforts in fulfilling it. And also, if you want to summarize the two, so one, Muslims have largely abandoned their mission. And that's the biggest mistake that happens in recent history, when people thought that Muslims have abandoned Islam because they're not praying and they're not fasting. And if we get them to come back and pray and fast and stop drinking, etc., then things will work out. Well, that happened. People came back to that kind of Islam, but nothing materialized. Nothing happened. Nothing has changed. Why? Because there was a problem in the diagnosis itself. Muslims did not abandon the rituals of Islam or the appearances. Muslims abandoned the heart of Islam, the mission of Islam. So unless you bring them back, you commit them to that mission of Islam, which will mobilize them, which will unify them, which will bring the best out of them, make them very motivated, very ambitious, very high aspirations. And with that level of mobilizations comes also unity, because that's what unifying mission does, or rallying mission. unless that happens, we're going nowhere. Yeah. So Muslims have abandoned their mission. And then there were two turning points. One of them is the one that you mentioned, is when you go, it's a major turning point and a very, very bad mistake. When Muslims traded their freedom for stability. When Muslim, after the bloody civil war that happened, they were looking for somebody who will establish law and order. By the way, we repeated this many times. We repeated this many times throughout our history. A lot of military coup, they were well received by the people, because before that there might be some chaos, so people looking for stability. So when somebody makes a coup d'etat and comes to power, people are happy. Why? Because he's going to establish law and order, stability. So when Muslims suffered in that bloody civil war toward the end of the Khulafa Rashidin, that era, they were looking for stability at any cost. And here we had one of the worst ideas that is still prevalent, which is حكم المتغلب أو إمارة المتغلب. Whoever takes power, regardless of how he does that and who he is, doesn't matter. Takes his grip on power and control, establish law and order. That's Amir al-Mu'minin. That's it. We're going to accept him. It doesn't matter what he does. One man show, makes decision, makes it turned into a dynasty, etc. So we had a very bad deal that justified or established or set up a very bad idea. The very bad deal is freedom for stability. Muawiyah, please, as long you're going to make things stable, do whatever you want. You can become an absolute ruler. That's bad deal. And the bad idea is then they went to fiqh to justify that. So moving forward throughout our history, it became normal that if somebody comes, by the way, a lot of the sympathy in the Muslim world with Russia is coming from this, because people are very impressed with the strong leader. Yani. They like that. So not only in their own countries, but even outside. Because I mean, if you look at the track record of, I mean, even though this is not the subject, but who is Putin? Yani? Look what he's done. He burned Chechnya completely. Yani. Demolished the whole country. Yani. And in Syria and others. Yani. So, but people are still like the strong leader, the one who really takes power and control. And a lot of people are, until now, I mean, they have this nostalgia to Gaddafi and to the strong leader who were overthrown by the Arab Spring. So anyway, so we had that turning point, and then the other turning point, which is sealed the deal. When Muslims decided, which I don't know, again, it's very good, out of very good intention, decided to stop ijtihad and freeze it because it's not needed anymore. We have 4 schools of thoughts. We have a lot of fiqh developed. So we don't need, and so to protect Islam from bid'ah, from deviation, so let's freeze it. Stop ijtihad completely. Nobody tried to reflect on the verses of Quran, come with different new interpretations. Nobody make ijtihad new fiqh. That's it. So for so many centuries now, we're still, when it comes to tafsir, Ibn Kathir and this and that, when it comes to fiqh, it's Shafi'i and Malik, etc. Even though things have changed completely. And that was not supposed to be. Even those scholars, by the way, they have never meant to have a school of thought, a rigid school of thought that will be frozen. They have never meant that. It's their student who turned the fiqh of their scholar into a school and made it froze it. But it was never meant to be like this. It was so flexible, and people have disagreement. And as you can see, there is hardly any matter in Islam about which there is a consensus. There's hardly. Wudu, Salah, Hajj, Zakat, fasting. You eat or you drink by mistake. Malik will tell you that this scholar will tell you you have to continue fasting and then make up for it, and the others say you're okay. Just continue fasting and you don't have to make up for it. And that applies to so many things that are even essential. So all this is leading us to this kind of discussion that it is about time to accept, confront that reality, which is really brutal, which is sad, I know, but you know, without accepting the reality, you cannot fix the problem. A physician can diagnose, can find out that his patient has cancer. Now they can give him good news. They can come and tell them, no, you're okay, you're gonna be fine, it's gonna be, I'm gonna give you some painkiller, but that's not good, that's not true. It's not gonna help. So confront the reality as is, and the current versions of Islam are very mutilated to large extent, and they are beyond repair. The least among them, the least damage, is when you see some things are blown out of proportion, even though they are minor in Islam, and some essential things that are marginalized. That's the least damage, but there are some bigger damage than this. So we had Islam that is single, very narrow, groups focusing on spirituality, others focusing on politics only, others focus on this and that. But that balanced, beautiful, inspiring, empowering version of Islam was lost. To a large extent was lost and need to be rediscovered and revived. And just to confirm what you said, Brother Muhammad, is this idea, this cycle, whenever there is a strong somebody who takes control. By the way, this is in countries, it can be in communities also, or it can be in political parties. If you have someone who takes full control, usually they establish what we call bitana, which is the closed circle around him. This is what you call the elite. They establish a circle around them of people who are taking advantage or have interest in that leader continuing to be in charge. And they usually isolate that leader from the world. They give him a different picture, different than the reality. They give him very rosy picture. If you check, you will find that before the collapse of some Arab regimes recently, before 1 week or 2 weeks, you will find that all reports coming, everything is rosy. People like you, everybody is happy, everything is okay. So, because why? They will tell the person what he wants to hear, not the reality. So that cycle has been happening since that time, since that transition from Khilafah Rashida to dynasty. It's a one-man ruler, absolute ruler. Then there is that closed circle, the corrupt 100%, and then isolate that leader from the reality and give them that rosy picture, and the cycle goes on until that leader may die or collapse, somebody else comes and they establish their own closed circle, etc. And we have been in this cycle for so long, oscillating like a pendulum between chaos and dictatorship. So you have dictatorship, they establish law and order, people adapt to it and accept until they can no longer take it, and then when they revolt, it's a period of mass chaos, and then another strong leader comes to establish law and order. That's the transition from Dawla al-Umayyad into Abbasi, into etc. And that's the transition now from one regime to another. It's a period of chaos, then strong leader, the new dictator to establish law and order.
Dr. Suhail, Assalamu
Yes.
alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
There's a question that I ask myself all the time, and I'm not sure if I know the answer. It's basically based on my conception that we probably are a level, we have an intellectual level that we understand these ideas and we can accept it or discuss it logically. And the majority of the people in the Muslim world, in my opinion, are unable to consume this kind of discussion, and most of them, unfortunately, are just like following sheep, following a herd, a herder. They grew up not depending on their intellect, and to have this. The results that we're aiming for, there must be a way. I mean, I don't know what that way is, but a few of us who adopt these ideas is not going to be enough to drive, because we're not the only people who are saying that. There are many other groups who are calling for this, but it's not loud enough. It's not widespread enough. Sometimes when I veer away from my small circle of people who I interact with on a regular basis, I discovered there's so much ignorance, even here in the United States, with Muslims who have lived here for years, and they're a copy of the masses in the Muslim world. So how do we expect change if we don't have either the majority of people accepting these ideas, or if there are leaders who deliver this message on a very wide spectrum and without being stopped? I don't know the answer to that.
Jazakallah khair. That's a very, very valid point. It's painful to accept that the reality that you described, which is that the trend is the trend towards stagnation and adaptation to the reality rather than changing it is so strong that it's hard even to stand in the face of this trend, never mind to try to change the direction of the current. So like you said, whenever you find yourself interacting with people, you find yourself very strange, stranger. Everybody else almost, they are describing the reality. They are complaining, maybe. They have very superficial explanations. Most of them, they revolve around the denial and excuses and scapegoats and etc. And here you are, you trying to tell them the root causes of this problem and the big work that need to be done. A lot of time you don't find yourself even dare to say that. Because if you are sitting with 6, 7 people or 8 people, if all of them are going with the flow, it's hard for you even to be different. A lot of time you find yourself just having to be quiet. And that's the nature of change all the time. The nature of change is always something that comes very strange in the beginning and rejected because you are trying to get people out of their comfort zone. Our people, the masses and the elite, both of them develop some sort of comfort zone. Whether it is accepting the reality as is and justifying and blaming it on somebody else, etc. Whether it is, and that happens especially for the elite, coming up with a very simplistic solutions, being active, but active not in changing. And that's another dilemma. We have a lot of, at least a good number of activists, but they are not game changers. They are activists, meaning managing the status quo. They are activists in the mosque, they are activists in some Muslim organization, charity, etc. All of this will not change anything. All of this is managing the status quo, maybe preventing things from getting worse, but it's not change. I mean, the work that you see done in Muslim community here and in Muslim organizations and groups and TV channels and social media, all of this, very noble effort coming out of very good intention, and people are volunteering and making a lot of sacrifice, but it's not going to lead to any change, because it's not game changers, it's activism that manages the status quo, or at best there is some lateral expansion, that the mosque becomes bigger, we have a couple more activities, etc. And we think that's a growth, or that's development, which is just lateral expansion. So it's like, when your income increases just to match the inflation. Your buying power did not increase. I mean, it just to match so that things does not get worse. It's very similar. How to deal about this? There is only one way that change has ever happened in history, especially drastic change like the one we're talking about. It's convincing people that there is a need to rediscover our deen and to re-embrace our defining mission and remake our community around rallying it around mission rather than rallying it around mosques and Muslim organization and Islamic activities and facilities. No, we want to rally it. Yes, we're going to still have facilities and activities and etc. But there is a mission that is gluing this community and turning it into a community that is similar to the prophetic community. The only way this has ever been done is that to reach the point that you mentioned, which is critical mass. To reach the point, because that's the point where the tipping point. Tipping point is when you reach critical mass. But to reach critical mass, the starting point has always been a core group. Call it movement, call it anything. It's a solid core group. Solid core group who meet not just to discuss ideas like what we're doing, which is good part of it. It's a good part that we are discussing idea and trying to make them more mature and more shared ideas, etc. But also to discuss how to implement this in reality, and how to promote it, and how to recruit, how to bring people on board. That's the level we did not cross. Just to be honest, this group have been meeting for so long. Alhamdulillah, I'm sure that we all benefited from this, but we remained in the first domain, which is the domain of discussing ideas. That transition toward structure and implementation and promotion of the idea and getting other people to be on board, because this is a huge project. It requires people to sponsor it with money. It requires people to share with some technical expertise. It requires people with some certain knowledge. It's a group effort. That transition we did not make, but there is no other way. I mean, until we cross that bridge, until we turn, we develop, we build, transform ourselves into a solid core group, like the first nucleus that the Prophet ﷺ established. Very solid, very diverse. You can see men and women, you can see people of different ages, people of different social status, everything, Arabs and non-Arabs. I mean, everything that was there in that nucleus that the Prophet established early on in Mecca. And until we do something like that, we're going to just keep doing what we're doing, which is, again, it's good, but they say good is the enemy of great. Now, we did not transition from good to great. You know, there is a book that says good to great. We did not transition from good to great. We're still doing something good. And alhamdulillah, that established a lot of foundation. And I believe if we make that commitment and become more serious about this, we will find a lot of ground that is ready for us. You know, I've been delivering this message for years in Shirley Gate Mosque, and some people have been attending it regularly. Until now, what they hear is ideas. They were not invited to be part of a group who want to implement this idea and want to promote it and want to invite people to contribute to the success of this idea, like what happened at the time for Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Again, some people, they have time, some people have money, some people have expertise, some people have knowledge, some people, and this project requires all of this. It requires all of this to be invested in that project so that it turns into reality.
I think Brother Qazi has a comment. Please.
Yes, brother. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum
It's
salam.
very interesting, the ideas that Dr. Suhail has talked about. I just thought that I'd add a few things to some of the things that have been said. And since I'm a relative latecomer to this group, so it's possible that you may have already discussed many of these ideas and thoughts. But based on what Brother Hamid also sent as a message this morning, I saw that as well. I thought I'd share a couple of things that may add to the discussion. The whole issue is that when we look at history, of course, we learn from history, and from history, we try to figure out how we can rectify ourselves for the future. And of course, there are many strategies that Dr. Suhail has also talked about here. But before we get to the strategies, I thought that if we can put this into perspective, the whole issue of racism or asabiya that Brother Hamid pointed to, and the tribalism that has existed. Now, before I point that out, there is an essential law in nature, a law that has been set into place by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in science and thermodynamics, we are taught of this law as the third law of thermodynamics. That law states that unless you do work, entropy increases. The entropy is essentially chaos. So for example, if I do not clean my house, then it's going to keep on accumulating dirt and dust, and that keeps increasing until a certain point in time when that goes into total ruin. So we've seen civilizations that have gone into ruin in the past, where cities got demolished, and when they were left as they are, they become ruins. Now, this is an essential law in nature, and that law happens everywhere in every aspect of nature. It also happens in our own bodies, that if I do not work to upkeep my body will decay until I reach my death. So this is also true with civilizations. It's true with our thought process. It's true with how we deal with our life. That if I do not keep on doing that jihad within myself and the ijtihad that you talk about, the intellectual jihad, as well as that jihad to rectify myself, if I don't keep on working on it, then I'm going to go towards that decay and the end to the whole story. So this is a very, very important law in nature. And if we look at it, there are certain aspects to this, which if I can break them down into some more components. The first thing is that while the greatest thing that is fighting against our need to become the true obedient servants, the ubad of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is our personal desire. And that is innate, it's built into us. And that is what sometimes we refer to as the nafsi ammara, as that nafs which is constantly trying to seek that selfishness within me, try to bring just that part which will satisfy my desires.
Hmm.
And asabiya, which is tribalism or racism or nationalism or regionalism, whatever you want to call it. This is not something new. It's existed in every single nation, right from the beginning of time, right from the time of Adam alayhi salam until our times, and it's not going to end, by the way. It existed in the time of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and that was one of the biggest things that he fought against, to eliminate that tribalism, because that's what creates the ummah, the whole concept of the ummah. So those same Arabs of that time, the Jahili Arabs, the Arabs who were totally drenched into the Asabiyya, were the ones who gave it up and became a part of the Ummah. So it's the transformation from the concept of Asabiyya to the Ummatic transformation, I'd say, where you then become a unity, become one, where you recognize a human being as a human being, rather than as an Arab or Ajam or a black or white or whatever differentiation that we wanted to call it. Now this happened, that transformation, when that happened, that's what transformed the Jahili Arab into a Sahabi. So the transformation from the Jahada into being a true companion in thought, at least, let's put it this way, of Rasulullah is a huge transformation. That means shedding all of the preconceived notions that we have got. Can I do that? Can I drop all of those and then become a human being that is trying in thought and in actual action, doing that jihad? Jihad is not just fighting with a sword or with a gun. That jihad which will transform me into what I should be. So this is, I think, a very, very important aspect of trying to do that. And what happens is that this Asabiyya and this whole process of the nafs ammara, where my nafs, the internal nafs which is seeking those desires only, that leads me to one other aspect, and which is what is the greatest sin in Islam, and that is shirk. And what is shirk? Where man thinks that I am the rational being, and that rational being is beyond the wahi, beyond the revelation, and that I know best, that I am the Fir'aun, that Fir'aun in true sense of my intellect. And I think I am supreme. And when I think that I'm supreme, and this happens with individuals as well as with nations, it's happening with nations around us today. With our dictators, the military leaders, or whoever, they do not really believe in the akhirah. They do not believe in the day that is going to come. That day, they have absolutely, I mean, they may say it with their tongues, but they don't really believe in it. And that is why they are looking at what is here on earth. I can see some of these people who accumulate billions and billions of dollars, and they keep on accumulating more. And they will oppress the poor people. Today, we know that less than a fraction of a percent of people own the vast majority of the wealth of this world. They don't care about anybody else. There are people who are dying, and yet we are more concerned about, did my cat or my dog get food or not? And did my cat or dog get comfort or not? Here I am totally oblivious of those human beings who are living in misery in Africa and Asia and others, because I really don't care. All I'm looking at is myself, me and me and me alone. So that nafs, the nafs ammara, combined with the asabiyya, where I look at after myself, I look at those who belong to my tribe, belong to my own type, my type, that's what really counts. I don't care about anybody else. So the third aspect, as I said, is about the whole concept of me being as great or greater than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, na'udhu billah. What this leads to is eventually the loss of values. And of course, certain people will retain certain values within their own tradition. but the essential values that have been set in place by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the wahi, through the revelation, are then lost, unfortunately. Now, one of the things that was also discussed, and I thought that was very important as well, as to how do we really go about to bring about that change. And that change, of course, it's a very deep subject, studying the seerah of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and to seeing how he brought about that change, where they shed these essential evil values and brought themselves to be totally in consonance with the wahi of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now that process has unfortunately come to an end. He was a Khatamun Nabiyyin, and being the last of the prophets, the message is delivered. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised us that this message is going to be preserved until the end of time. So over these centuries, as Dr. Suhail also rightly pointed out, that we have gone back in that cycle, because that is part of the entropy. That entropy which keeps on coming back to us, and we fall back into that same thing where we don't work hard enough to bring back that essence of Islam, that essence of denial of the asabiyya, denial of that racism, denial of those desires. How do you work towards that and bring about a change within an individual as well as within the nation? Now, there is a famous hadith of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, as we probably all know about it. It's about the tajdeed, where Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had said words to the effect that Inna Allah la ya'bathu ala qawmin ala kulli miyati sanatin man yujaddidu laha dinaha. That is, it is on or during or on the turn of every century, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends a person or persons who bring about that renewal of these concepts. And we've seen the struggle between the batil and the haqq continues. It may continue in a small way or in a large way. Now, our group here, I know that we are all concerned about this whole thing. We're also searching for that. Some are contributing in a greater way, some in a lesser way, and some over these centuries who really had an impact where certain batil came into place and somebody played a very major role to bring about that change. One of the biggest, one of the earliest ones that people refer to is that of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, where he goes back and he's recognized as the fifth of the Khulafa Rashidin. But then amongst others, in every century, we find this whole process. So that whole concept of tajdeed, what is that tajdeed, is something that needs to be explored. I don't claim to have an answer that I would say that, yes, this is the answer that's going to bring about the solution, because these set of problems, the set of issues, the environment changes, and it's been changing. So I cannot use necessarily the parable of a first or second or fifth century and say I impose that on today's problems, because today's problems are much more complicated, much more diverse, and yet the essence is still the same. The essence is where we are still leading into a growth of entropy within ourselves, where we don't work towards it. So how do we work towards this? It is an open question. I thought I'd share some of these thoughts here, and I'm sure that many of our friends here can elaborate many more interesting things based on how to bring about that change. And maybe it's not even a discussion that can happen within a day or so. It's going to be a discussion, a long-term discussion. I'm sorry it took a little longer to express my thoughts here. So thank you very much.
Jazakallah khair. I think bouncing ideas is always useful, but we really have to move to the next level, which is after finding out what needs to be done, we need to ask ourselves, how can we do it? And we start actually doing it. Unfortunately, right now, it's not even tajdeed that is needed. Tajdeed is when you have something that is still working, but need to be fixed. And we need really to start all over again, almost. I don't think what we inherited that was frozen for so long can be fixed by remodeling. A lot of time rebuilding a house is easier than remodeling it, especially if it is in very bad shape. The damage that happened to the understanding of Islam and to the Muslim mind and to the Muslim personality is very deep and very compounded, and there is no easy way to fix it. A lot of misconceptions that are coming out of wrong religious ideas, twisted religious ideas, like qada and qadar. We blame qadar for everything, even for our own failure. So everything is qadar, everything is ibtila, everything is this and that. Some also bad ideas or futile that come from culture that has been stagnant for so long. So there is no creativity, and there are a lot of ideas that justify the status quo and justify or push you to be indifferent or to push you to give up, and so basically trap you one way or another and get you out of that mood of having a mission and having the confidence to change your reality and to change yourself first, as you said, brother, and then to change the reality. Jihad of nafs. If you think about it, the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the key to the change that he has made was unity of purpose and unity of leadership. He established among those people coming from different tribes and living a life that is very empty with no purpose in life. And these people, they start having the common mission or cause, and then unified leadership. And the leadership is critical in Islam because we have the most effective leadership model, and I'm someone who have read almost every book that was written about leadership. The most effective leadership model, we find it in the prophetic model. It combines a lot of contemporary theories that have advantage and disadvantage. You find the Prophet ﷺ combined the advantage of all these models. It was an individual leadership, but was also collective. It was consultative. Rasul ﷺ will consult about everything, but also was very decisive. It's not like consultation that leads to paralysis. It's an amazing model. The companions, they voiced their opinion with no hesitation. The Prophet encouraged them even to do that. But when decision is made, there is a lot of discipline. It's an amazing model that we lost, among other things that we lost. And now we have models that are going nowhere. I mean, we don't have leaders. We are leaderless communities. We have managers, we have imams, we have speakers, we have administrators, we have activists, but we don't have leaders. Because a leader, that's a different category, is someone who has a vision and has the strategy to get there and succeed to sell this vision and this strategy and get people to rally behind it. So the Prophet ﷺ succeeded in establishing that unity of purpose and unity of leadership. And he did that by, as you keep talking about Asabiyya, he did that by changing two things that define the individual. I mean, what defines you as an individual, one is the identity, who you are, and two is your calling or your mission, what do you want to accomplish in life. Man nahnu wa madha nurid. Who are we and what is it that we are trying to accomplish? The people in the Arabian Peninsula before the Prophet ﷺ, who are we? We are a tribe. We belong to a tribe that we're ready to fight for that tribe. Who are you? أنا Bani Hashim. Who are Bani Umayyah? Bani this, Bani that, and Quraysh tribe. The identity was the tribe. Like, what do you want to accomplish in life? Nothing. We're just living. we're living, and we may end up fighting other tribes for a silly issue and for survival. So Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he took people with tribal identity and no mission and changed those two things. That's why the transformation was big, because when you succeed to transform the identity and the calling or the mission of a person, that person becomes somebody else. After Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, who you are, that's what Riba ibn Amir, when he stood before the king of Persia, who are you, what do you want? He told him in 10 seconds. إن الله ابتعثنا لنخرج الناس من عبادة العباد إلى عبادة رب العباد ومن جور الأديان إلى عدل الإسلام ومن ضيق الدنيا إلى سعة الدنيا والآخرة. We are people who are on a mission to save humanity, to establish justice, etc. That was not there before Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. If you ask the same person, that's Riba ibn Amir, before that will be in who you are, I belong to this tribe. What do you want to achieve in life? I'm just surviving. So Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam turned these people to be, I am someone who has a mission, and I belong to this new movement. So the identity also changed. Then I'm a citizen of the Medina and a member of that movement of the prophetic community. That's a big transformation. And that transformation is not happening today. Now we unfortunately, we went back to Asabiyya, and which is those smaller identity. And we went back to be people with no mission. And that's very big transformation in a negative way. It was very big transformation in a positive way that the Prophet has done. And now there is a big transformation in a negative way that happens, unfortunately, in among Muslims. So nowadays, first of all, we were divided into countries, but that's fine. I mean, we can accept that. The nation state became a reality now. But even within the country itself, people are divided left and right, segmented. One, you find like Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, etc., sectarian. Another tribal, Yemen, Libya, etc., tribal. Another political, ideological. Who are you? And I belong to this party, and I'm Islamic party, I'm communist, I'm this, I'm that. And that comes before even citizenship, before anything else. And then, of course, to social classes, and then regional. And then even sports fans. People are divided in, I mean, you can tell me that even in advanced nations or other nations, people are divided. Yes, they are divided. But there is this concept of citizenship that is very strong. I mean, people in Belgium, they speak two different languages. There are a section of Belgium and another section, they don't speak even the same language. But they have that national identity. That national identity is largely lost today. And if people are affected both in their identity, which becomes messy, and then in their mission, which they abandoned, you can expect everything that you see. And the only way to turn things around is, again, to fix those two pillars, the foundation. People, they have to know who they are. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it clear when he described this ummah. He described it linked to a mission. كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر وتؤمنون بالله ولتكن منكم أمة يدعون إلى الخير ويأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر أولئك المفلحون يا الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله. Stand out for justice. You are the best of communities sent to humanity to fulfill this mission. Very clear. There is a defining mission that you have to discover it and embrace it wholeheartedly. And then who you are all those identities. They should not be conflicting. Now, unfortunately, we transmitted this identity crisis to our children. A lot of Muslim youth nowadays, they have their identity messed up. Why? Because, and unfortunately, we created an artificial conflict between their religious identity as a Muslim and their American identity as a citizen, even though Islam is compatible with every citizenship. There is no conflict. You can be very good Muslim, and you should be very good Muslim and very good citizen, wherever you are. And then we created this community, which is okay. We need to create a community and establish community, but it should not be for the purpose of isolation from the society or become an alternative identity. No, you belong to a society that's a larger belonging. In that society, you belong to some community that has this great mission toward the whole society. In other words, we're gonna have to raise a generation. I mean, I know it's hard for our generation who migrated, but we need to raise generation. Those are born and raised here. They should be thinking that as Americans who happen to be Muslim, it's not as Muslims who happen to be living in America. You are American, you should be proud of this. And there is nothing wrong with any citizenship. Wherever you are born, that's your citizenship. And that's the place you belong to. And you should be loyal to it and look for the best interests of your country. And doing all of this inspired and guided by your Islamic principles, Islamic value. And there is no contradiction whatsoever. This is one of the easiest place in the world in which you can live your Islam without any problems. In many, including in Europe, there might be some restrictions here and there. Sometimes government interferes in management of mosques and banning this and banning that. But there is no probably better place, even compared to Muslim countries, better place to live by your principles and even to promote them and advocate them other than here. So again, the amount of work that is needed, because you need to rewire and reformat the Muslim mind and the Muslim personality, and need to plant that mission again and bring about a community who is driven by that great mission and united by that great mission, and also have true leadership in the way that we had in the model of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, that unfortunately was not very well studied by Muslims, even to look at the prophetic model of building and leading community, which is very effective, and probably no theory come close to the way the Prophet ﷺ has built and led that community, combining the advantages of every leadership model or every leadership theory that are even now, that people now are aware of them.
I encourage all of our attendees here to question. Anybody has question or comment? Should we then do brothers? I mean, it doesn't have to be long comment, maybe a few words or a few questions or something. One question. Well, if not, I think here to look at the community. You mentioned, I think both of you mentioned our community here, and we've been discussing the problems or the shortcomings that we have. I mean, we have good numbers, but the effective or the efficiency or the outcome that we do or the work we can affect life in is very minimum. We have, we have a lot. We need a lot of changes. We need. We have problems back home. We have problems here, but it looks like we are not able to do anything. And I think this is a sign of weakness. And I think every one of us can look where is the problem. It's our responsibility to think and to put some, I mean, if you cannot maybe sometimes find the answer or the solution, we have to discuss that. I think one of the really things that Allah maybe subhanahu wa ta'ala don't like for us is to be silent. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked us to, in the Quran, the first thing came to Rasulullah was Iqra. And Iqra is not just read the words. To Sayyidina Muhammad, we know he doesn't read. Iqra is to maybe to do things in life, to think, to change things, because this is what happened. After he got this message, Iqra, look at what he did. He transformed his people from people who have no value in life to people who changed life, who changed the whole Middle East and then moved to Europe, and they have a message that we still carrying until today. I think what we need to do, we have to really carry this responsibility and don't be silent. I mean, if you see something happening in your community, try to improve it. Being silent, being a good citizen is not the citizen who doesn't ask questions. Other thing that I would like to raise is our measurements, how we look at people. And mostly in our community, the people who, I mean, the brothers who memorize Quran is maybe the highest thing we have. But that's not true. I mean, sometimes it's a great thing to memorize Quran, but it's more important to do thinking, which is tadabbur, tafakkur of the Quran, and make that reality. Take the Quran and make changes with this Quran. I mean, it's not, as you mentioned, the mission. Mission is you do something with this, with your understanding of Quran. Again, I encourage everybody to have a question so we have maybe more fruitful discussion.
Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Alaikum assalam.
It's like I agree a lot with very much everything that was said. Just to add into some of the comments about even Jahiliyyah, even people when they were in Jahiliyyah and they were actual tribal during the time, they have some dignity. And that dignity has been lost. And until we find that dignity and we define what dignity is, until we start eating from whatever we're planting, as they say, until we kill the poverty that we're living in and the ignorancy that we're living with and the fear that we live in, I think we're never gonna change, and it needs to come from us. It's like what Brother Muhammad just said is really what triggered me even to talk now. It's about we need to admit that we failed. And the same thing in general, like when we look at the Arab countries, the Muslim countries, the history, it's like without admitting where the mistakes happened, where we failed, we cannot move on. And that's what the message is. It's like we're trying, and what Dr. Suhail just said, it's like, it seems like we have to start from new. We cannot even to rebuild on anything. We have to start anew. And even starting anew, it's like we need to decide to start anew. We need to admit that, all right, let's move on and let's start anew, without having to question, because it just seems like we're using the same tools, the same suggestions, and that's what is like. and we're always late. We're waiting for. We need to be sabr. We need to use that sabr. Sabr is good, but it's like there is some situations when people under the ground, for example, like what we have in the earthquake, they need to be. It's like they have certain number of days that you can save them from it, and that's what we need. It's like we need somebody. We need to save us from that earthquake, from under those buildings, under the rubble. We need to save ourselves as to stay alive and to move on. If we need our kids and we need a change for this world, because otherwise I would think of it like what the refugees parents are gonna look at. If we're not gonna move on with our lives, we're gonna have kids gonna walk through those hills in Syria or in Turkey without shoes next year. And what we're gonna do about it? We're just gonna cry and wait for the help of the United Nations? I don't know. Thank you.
Dr. Sir, you are on mute.
Yeah, what you call, it's called sense of urgency. And that's also something that unfortunately is not there anymore, which is even though Islam encourages us tremendously that if you can do something now, don't delay it or postpone it till next hour or next, because there might be no opportunity. So many verses and hadith that are tackling this idea that because a lot of time we came to the point that we know what needs to be done, but also we get into this obstacle of taking our time, as if time is open-ended. But so not only we need really to have the sense of mission back, but also we need to have it with a sense of urgency. And a hadith of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam are amazing in like, even if you see the sign of the Day of Judgment and you still can plant something, don't hesitate to do it. Just to tell you that no excuse to delay anything, because that was very valid excuse to say, what's the point? Why should I plant it if it's over? But the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam went to that extreme so that nobody can come up with any other excuse. If that's not an excuse, then no other. And then, of course, take advantage of 5 before 5. When you are alive before death, when you are healthy, before you are sick, when you have time, before you become busy, when you have, etc. So, as I said last time, a lot of time I can see ourselves doing closer to doing the opposite of the teachings of our deen than implementing the teachings of our deen. A lot of time we fall closer to the opposite. This deen calls us to be people who are game changers and difference makers. We tend to be passive and indifferent. This deen calls us to have that sense of urgency. We find ourselves time is not important at all, to the point that you have so many young people. I mean, by the way, I mean, it become normal there, but it's not normal at all to see those coffee shops full with people sitting for hours doing nothing. It became normal in Muslim country, but it's not normal at all. And a lot of them are young people. And if you ask them, they say, we're killing the time. We're killing the time. It's the time's so precious, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from his wisdom, he made it that your moment can come anytime, so that the clock is ticking and you are always in a sense of urgency, because you never know. I mean, you see what happened with the earthquake, and a lot of time you open Facebook and you find young people died accident here and there, people healthy, young, etc. So Jazakallah khair that you added that piece, which is not only there is huge, humongous job that needs to be done, which is almost to start all over again. but also it has to be done with a sense of urgency because time is not on our side. And it's okay for a nation or community to be in crisis. It's okay to fail, but it's not okay to deny it. That's the problem. I mean, we have seen Germany twice went very deep down, total destruction and total collapse, and completely. But it's how you rebound, how you bounce back. So yes, we failed and failed miserably. And we are in a very terrible situation. But we have all the tools to create the great success stories. And we have no excuse not to do it. We just have to confront the reality, accept it, and then get to the bottom of it, to the root causes.
I would like to add, if nobody, Nidal, you want to say something? Please go ahead.
If you allow me.
Yes, please go ahead.
All right, thank you. I would like to first kind of thumb up for the idea that everyone or nations might fail, and this is not an issue. It is an issue, but it is not the concerns. The concern is how to come back and how to really wake up from this issue. Or most of us would remember from Ghazwat Uhud when it was a failure for all Sahaba, including Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, but after Uhud they learned a lot of lessons from that. They did not say, no, it's your fault. We know that Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and Sahaba are human, and I attended the khutbah of Dr. Anushi last Friday when he touched upon very important point, which is even Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is a human being, and he is even for Isra al-Mi'raj, for the things that he had suffered and the Am al-Huzn, he is a human, and he sometimes concerned about something. He's emotionally sometimes tired. He is a human, but he was able with the Sahaba to learn from the lessons, although they have very bad feeling or they're down because of Ghazwat Uhud, but they were able to learn from these lessons and have another nasr, another kind of achievements in the future. So that's very, very important. And also talking about the change, and since I studied change for organizations, as Dr. Anushi said, that there is a game changer in the change process. We call them sometimes change agents in the organizations, the ones who believe in the mission, and they are able to take the change to the next level, because yes, they believe in this mission, but they are able to put more efforts in order to get this change move.
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you're right. It's there is a sentence that I keep repeating, that there is so much to learn and so much to do. There is so much to learn about our deen and about our life, etc. I really wonder how people can come up with time to waste. I mean, every day, when it finishes, I always regret that number of things I wanted to do, just I couldn't. It's racing against the clock. There is so much to learn about our deen, our life, our mission, and this world, etc. And there is so much to do that even if you work for 24 hours, it's not enough. That's what we really need to realize. And Quran was keep telling us this, and who we are and what kind of mission we were selected to fulfill, and how big that and how noble. It's a great honor, a great responsibility, etc. Just we didn't live up to it. It's never too late, but the starting point is to accept that One, there was a big failure. Two, there is a terrible situation. And enough sugarcoating, enough justification, enough denial, enough blaming our failure on anything. But the biggest lessons that probably the Sahaba, the prophetic community have learned came from the defeat in Uhud. Amazing, came with so many lessons. One of them, and the great one, was to establish once for all the principle of shura and consultation, and to make it independent of the results. Because anybody else in the place of the Prophet ﷺ who would tell them that, you know what, I consulted with you last time, we ended up in a disaster. From now on, whatever I tell you, you just do it. Quran came after Uhud, said, وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ. The process was correct. The mistakes were somewhere else, not in the principle. So شَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ, that's if the Prophet ﷺ, who receives the revelation, and after apparently shura consultation led to disaster, Quran comes to say شَاوِرْهُمْ, consult with them, that's it. That principle was set in stone. Nobody can even touch it yet. That's one. Second, this idea of accepting responsibility for what happened. قُلْ هُوَ مِنْ عِنْدِي أَنفُسِكُمْ. That's another huge lesson that came from that defeat. قُلْ هُوَ مِنْ عِنْدِي أَنفُسِكُمْ. You only have yourself to blame. Because the companions, they were wondering and they were trying to find an explanation. How come and we are Muslims and we are defeated by these mushrikeen? Why? How come this happened? And where the help from Allah? All of these was in their minds, because there are long verses that were revealed for Uhud. Just read the Surah of Ali Imran, pages telling them what you should not think about, what Quran was ruling out some possibilities and was emphasizing other possibilities, and then ended up at the end to say, قُلْ هُوَ مِنْ عِنْدِي أَنفُسِكُمْ. And then also the fact that the help from Allah is conditional. Because Muslims after Badr, they thought that because they are Muslim, they will be victorious all the time. So that principle was established after Uhud. That the help from Allah is there already. And Quran was revealed to tell them that like in Badr, Allah could have help, but you did not qualify. You did not meet the requirements. Why? Because منكم من يريد الدنيا ومنكم من يريد الآخرة. Because the intentions were not pure, because there was no discipline, and then you paid the price. So from now on, you know, and all these lessons that were revealed then, they are not learned by Muslims until nowadays. Until nowadays, we don't have that shura. Everybody who takes over a mosque or a community or party or a group, they full control. We don't have this taking charge of what happens to us and accepting responsibility and calling things by the way they are. Quran called it فشل, failure, مصيبة, وعصيان. You disobeyed. حتى إذا عصيتم وتنازعتم في الأمر، حتى إذا تنازعتم في الأمر، حتى إذا فشلتم وتنازعتم في الأمر وعصيتم من بعد ما أراكم ما تحبون منكم من يريد الدنيا ومنكم من يريد الآخرة. يعني failure, disobedience, and dispute. And so it's amazing. And that's how that community was growing all the time. As I mentioned in this last Jumu'ah, from the Quran that was revealed, and they were studying it and implementing it to become better individuals and better community and stronger. And from the incident that takes place and the lessons they learn from them. And that's how individuals grows always. You become a better person from the knowledge that you learn and you implement, and from the incident that you go through in life. If you know how to handle them, and if you learn your lessons, you become better person and stronger. And the same thing for the community.
Jazakallah khair, Dr. Suhail. Inshallah, we'll see you next Sunday at noon. Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum, everybody.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
جزاكم الله خير. إن شاء الله we'll see you next Sunday.
Assalamu alaikum.